I want to talk about some different selectors now and some specific kinds we call pseudo selectors. I looked up here a list of CSS selectors, and you can see there's a lot here. We've used classes and direct classes applied to a tag, and descendant selectors, IDs. You can see the wildcard that goes to everything, the element themselves. There's the class we just talked about. The comma, which kind of acts like an and sign, so divs and paragraphs. We have again, there's the descendant. There's a direct child selector, and there's a lot of these. You can go into items that are placed immediately after or preceded by an element, or different attributes that you want, or different things. But the ones I want to talk about today are some of these that have this little colon and then a word. And some of my favorites on here are like the after tag. And an after tag, you can go through and say something like, after a paragraph, then put this content in there, and you can see how remember this is inserted after every paragraph in here. Lots of them. But let's focus on a couple today we're going to play around with. The first one we're going to mess with is first of type. And first of type will look up every element that's a first of this kind from a parent. So the example here that it gives, when it looks at the paragraph, it looks at all four of them, and this is the first of that type that's seen inside of that parent. And so that one's kind of thrown on. We can also look at the first child, and this is going to look at every element that's the first child of its parent. And so let's look at this example here. You can see we've said we want to look at the first child of paragraphs, and so this one is the first child of the body, and so it's turned on. And as we kind of go along, we have this div tag here, and this one is the first child of this div tag, and so it looks at the very first child of some tag. I don't really use that one a lot, but it can be handy in certain circumstances. There's last of type, which is kind of similar to the first of type. Where's that one here? Right here. And we can look at this example really quickly. But it's grabbing the fourth paragraph and turning that one live. You can see that taking place there. And then the one I really wanted to get into with tables today is the nth of type. And this one's fun. Let's go over here and apply it into our thing. So what we want to do is we want to look at our rows, and we want to apply some specific styling to our rows. And maybe we want to just change the background color to just be slightly different. Maybe we'll just use an RGBA. I'll apply black, but I'll apply such a small amount that it'll have an opacity of 10%. And on this, I'm going to apply the nth of type. And in here we can give it first off a number if we want, and that doesn't look any different because it's being applied number 1. Let's go to number 2 here and look at that, and you can see how this line is just a little bit darker, and we could go to 3 if we wanted, and look at that. That one's not 32. Let's look at that again. So line number 3, and you can see this is not being highlighted right here because we have that row span being applied, and it's not technically on that row. This is part of the row up above. So one thing we can do is we can put some math in here. So we could do something like a 2n, and n is going to be our counter, and so it'd start at 0, and 2 times 0 would be 0, and then 2 times 1 would be 2, and 2 times 2 would be 3. And so you kind of get this, where we can do multiple rows every other one, and we could make it, that one's even, and we can make it odd by just putting a little bit of math in here. And you can see how we made that odd. Now this one's not being turned on because we do have some color being applied to those THs, and those THs are sitting on top of the row, so they take precedent even though it does come before. Another thing we can do instead of math is we can say even, or we can say odd, and that will also work with the nth of type, and you can see that working there. So these pseudo classes just kind of add little things that we might need to make our tables a little bit nicer. I'd recommend everybody looking down through the CSS selector list. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with different forms and selections and just some really cool stuff. But that nth of type is really powerful as far as selecting, every other or odd or something like that and getting those applied.